Hey everybody, thanks for joining us here today. I'm super happy to have Joel Wolfson with us. Hey Joel.
Hey there, how you doing, Nicole?
Good. We're really happy to have him back. He is going to be going over some of the ways that he's integrating Topaz plugins with Lightroom and Photoshop to create those extra little touches necessary for outstanding images. Some of the plugins that he's going to be going over today is the new Topaz StarEffects, Topaz Remask, which I just love the image he's going to be working on today. And then also he's going to be showing off a little Topaz Adjust and Detail as well. So I'm excited to see how he's working with those. So with that, let me go ahead and tell you a little bit about Joel. You're looking at some of his imagery on screen right now. But Joel is actually a Southwest native. He's been published internationally, and just a few of his notable clients include Newsweek, Elle, 17, Family Circle, and he also has some corporate clients such as Apple, AT&T, United Airlines, and Pillsbury. He is one of the pioneers of digital photography, and some of his digital photography articles have been translated for use in more than 30 countries, so he definitely knows his stuff. He's also been an educator and has been teaching photography since 1985. He conducts digital photography seminars for Apple and other corporations, and he's been doing that since the early 90s. And he also runs some workshops and teaches photography out of his Flagstaff studio. And he conducts workshops around the world as well. And P.S., I think he has a couple spots left for his Tuscany workshop. So if you're interested, I'll give you that information at the end of the webinar. So with that, Joel, I will go ahead and give this over to you so you can get started.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thanks for joining us. I'm happy to be back doing another Topaz webinar. In a way, this is an extension of my last webinar in that I'm going to be showing some of my favorite plugins and how I use them in my own workflow. I wish I had the time to show all of them, but I'll just be focusing on a few. Nicole mentioned some of those. As you know, there are often many ways to accomplish a task when we're working on a digital image. And the plugins really help us do that more efficiently and oftentimes better. A lot of times we can do something in Photoshop, but it may end up being time-consuming, or the same thing with Lightroom. And the beauty of plugins is that it can really make our task easier and oftentimes better. And with some of them, there's things we can do that there aren't necessarily any other way to do it. And of course, Topaz has a whole slew of plugins. I think they're up to 10 or 11 now. And today I'm going to kind of focus on Remask and to a little lesser extent Adjust and Detail, and just show you how I integrate those. And I'm also pretty excited to be showing the new StarEffects. This is a new one from Topaz. And the name is a little deceiving because StarEffects really does more than just do stars. So I think there are a lot of applications you might not think of, especially just from the name. So without further ado, I'm kind of excited to get into StarEffects, so I'll show it to you. The image you see on your screen is a night skyline shot of San Diego that I did recently. And, you know, it's well exposed and it's not a bad skyline shot, but if you take a look at this, over on the right-hand side and towards the bottom here, it's pretty bright. Over on the left, especially in the upper left-hand area here, it isn't quite as bright. Now, there are plenty of lights there, and there's a lot of color. It's very nice, but just in terms of visual balance, it's a little heavily weighted towards the right. So what I want to do is work on that left-hand side, and this is an ideal application for StarEffects. Right now I'm in Lightroom. I'll bring up my film strip on the bottom there. So I could do this from within Lightroom, but I'm going to go into Photoshop because I want to work on just a portion of the image. So this is a little trick for efficiency as well, and I'll show you what I mean in just a second here. So the way I get in there from Lightroom is I can either right-click on the image, or I can go up here to the Photo menu, say Edit In, and we're going to go to Photoshop. Lightroom asks me if I want to make a copy with my adjustments or go to the original if the original was a Photoshop image. So here we are in Photoshop. And let me just shrink these down on the right so you can see it a little better. So what we want to do is concentrate on this upper left-hand part of the image. Oops, I got to find my layers here. So I am going to make an additional layers just to make sure I'm not working on my original background copy. And I'm going to go over to the upper left-hand corner here in Photoshop and get the marquee tool, which gives me those little marching ants. And I'm going to select just the area that I want to work on. And that's more or less this upper left-hand area right here. So all I have to do is select that. And now I'm going to go into StarEffects. And the reason I'm only selecting a portion, there are a couple reasons. It's more efficient in general, but also StarEffects does a lot of computing, and this is just going to make the whole process a little faster and more efficient. So I'm going to go up to my filter menu, and I scroll down to Topaz Labs, and there are all my different plugins, and I'm going to go down here to StarEffects, and then this will take the image and launch it into StarEffects. Now, for those of you that are not all that familiar with the Topaz plugins, what happens is when you open one up, it will sort of default to wherever you were last in case you wanted those same settings. What I like to do just as a matter of habit is to reset myself back to a neutral point. So if you look in the lower right-hand corner here where I'm pointing, I just hit Reset All, and that kind of brings me back to a neutral point. I'll just run through the interface quickly here. For those of you that haven't seen this before, it's very similar to the other Topaz plugins that are made for adjusting your images. So in the upper left here, we have a little thumbnail view, and that gives us kind of a little preview of the presets. And what the presets are down on the left, presets are a combination of settings that Topaz has put together for us that you can find, that often you find useful. And I like the presets for a couple reasons. One is that sometimes it'll give me ideas I hadn't thought of, and also sometimes it'll give me a good starting point. So you can see if I scroll over something here, you can see the little thumbnail changing. You'll also see the progress bar going on the bottom there. So as I go over these, it actually is sort of processing that little mini thumbnail there so we can see what's going on. So I think what I'm going to do is look at the City Lights ones. And City Lights 2 has maybe a little bit more glow to it. I'm just going to click on it to process it and see where we are. Well, that's a heck of a good start, I think. Already we've filled in some of the stuff on the left there. You'll notice, though, that within this little section, even though I've added some more lights here, and you notice they're not star-shaped. In this case, the City Lights preset has settings to make it more of a glow, which is really what I'm looking for. Hence the name City Lights, I guess. So these stars or these glows, the lights in the lower right are a little too prominent. They were pretty good before I started, and I'll just show you a before and after. So if I hold down my space bar, that's a shortcut to give you a before. If you notice in the upper left, I can also just click on them here too. So there's my before. There's my after, and it's just a little too bright down here. They were good before I started. So luckily, under star settings, there's a really slick way to hide or reveal the star effects that are there. So I'm just going to click on hide, and the brush allows me to make whatever size I want. I can literally just paint over these areas, which I'm going to do right now. Just move my brush over all these areas of the really bright lights, because those were bright enough to begin with. And then as soon as I let go, you see it processes it down. I'm going to make this just a little bigger so you can see that better. So there's my before. I'm sorry, there's my after. I'm going to do a before. There's the before right there, and there's my after. Now that's pretty good. We're getting a little more balanced. However, what I'd like to see is still a few more of these glowing effects over on the left side of my image. So I'm going to go to the next panel down. By the way, I guess I didn't run through this side of the interface. Up on top is the preview for navigating You saw me, I just worked the magnification controls, and so once I'm magnified, I can just move this red box around to bring me to that part of the image. And then, as with many of the other Topaz plugins, it's sort of a top-down design. So a lot of times you can just go right in the order of these tabs and do your adjustments. So I'm in the main adjustments, and the threshold is the slider that sort of determines which of these light sources are worthy, so to speak. And as I move it to the right, it makes it less sensitive, so I'll have fewer lights being affected. And if I move it to the left, it will have more lights being affected. Essentially, it will go and reveal much dimmer light sources to give them an effect. So that's better already in terms of I have some more there. I think, however, the size of these is probably a little too large. So although I have these glowing things, some of them are a little too big. So this size adjustment right here, the couple sliders down, is going to allow me to make those a little less prominent. So I think that's pretty good. So now we have more points. We've got our glow size going pretty well here. The only thing that I might want to do to this more is I'm going to zoom in so you can see what I'm talking about here. Now what I want to show you is I'm going to move over to this part of the image, and I'm going to go to the before mode. I have to wait for my little status bar there. So if I go to the before, this is what the image original capture was like. And what I want to point out is if you look at some of these light sources, they already have little star points on them. So there is a little bit of a star shape to them. If I go to my after, you can see I have the glow on some of these additional lights that it's bringing up here, these light sources. But I'm missing those points. And if I really want to match the rest of my image the way it was originally captured, I might want to add some of those points. So I can do that down here under additional effects. And there's this thing called secondary points. So I'm going to move that over. Now we'll try about halfway. And once it's done, you'll see now if you look up here, it's fairly subtle, but I have these little points there. I'll do it before so you can see the glows, and the after, and I get a little bit of those stars so that it's kind of matching. If you look over here on this building here, you see each of these has these little extra points, those sharp points. So that helps me kind of match my original image there. So I'm going to go back to the original size here. And now that I'm looking at it, I might go back to my main adjustments, and I think I'm going to maybe bring the size down just a hair more. And so now I think my glow kind of matches. In the places where I added the glow, it kind of matches the glow where it was in the original photo. So let's say okay. I think we have a pretty nice looking image there. And while that's calculating, what I want to point out is that if you were to try to do this in another program, it would be very difficult. So I'm going to get rid of our marching ants there, and I'll just do a little before and after here. So there's before, and there's after. Here, I'm just going to move this window over so you can see the whole image at once. So you see before, not a bad image, but those lights really aren't balanced. Now I click on this, and I've got kind of that nice glow throughout the image, and now my left side is a lot more balanced to the rest of the image. And all of this took a matter of a few minutes, and I've got a really nice balanced night image skyline here, and it really didn't take a whole lot of effort. It's pretty cool. Very cool program. So I am going to show another little bit of StarEffects later on for a totally different way of using it, but I just think this is a really neat program and really has a lot of applications that you might not think of until you start playing around with it. So I encourage you all to try this out. The next, I'm going to go back to Lightroom here, which is sort of my hub for my digital life. And I'm going to pick another image here, totally different kind of image. This image right here, actually I scanned this from film. I shot this in the Paria Canyon Wilderness area in northern Arizona near the border of Utah. And it's got all these cool rock formations. And what I'm going to show you here is using Remask in detail. So I'm pretty happy with the image overall. The only thing is I have a couple issues in the sky. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here. And let me just zoom in a little more so you can see better. There we go. So if you look at the clouds, not that you know it, but I was there shooting it, they had more texture in them than the camera apparently reveals. And so I just want to work on the sky and change the texture in there a little bit, accentuate it more. And also, to me, the color's a little off. I shot this on Fujifilm that really saturates the colors, and it's a little cyan to me. But mainly, I want to work on these clouds. So I need to isolate the sky. And Remask can do this very quickly and simply. And so what I'm going to do is take this into Photoshop. So same thing, I'm doing Edit In, going to Photoshop, and there's our image. And what I want to do is go under the Filter menu, and I'm going to go down to Topaz again, and I'm going to bring up Remask 3, which is the current version of Remask. Now you notice the interface is a little different here, but it's actually a pretty simple interface. This one's a little different because it really isn't intended for doing all kinds of different adjustments and manipulations. It's really just for masking. For those of you that may not be all that familiar with masking, essentially what masking does is it allows us to isolate parts of an image by blocking out parts of it and letting other parts come through. So it's a lot like an actual physical mask like you might put on your face. It blocks your face except for certain cutouts. So that's the way this thing works. And it's actually pretty simple in terms of the way they have this thing color-coded. You notice that all the tools are either green, red, or blue. The green is what we keep, and you notice the whole image right now is green. So the default when it opens is keeping the whole image. Now naturally we want to cut out the bottom part and keep the sky. So the way we do that is with these tools for the keep and the cut, and the blue is the compute. So green is keep, red is cut, and blue is compute. Now the computing brush, I'll show you what that means in a second. I'm going to magnify it first, and over on the left we have a little preview image for navigating. I can magnify there. I'm clicking on 1:1. I can move this red box around. This should look pretty familiar at this point, very similar to what we just did in StarEffects in terms of the navigation. And what this compute brush does is it defines the border between what we're keeping and what we're not keeping. And you actually brush it in. And what you can do is change the size of the brush depending on what you have. And what I've found is that when you have that basically you want the brush as small as you can get it and still be able to cover both sides of your border, essentially. So if you have, say, something with a lot of grass or you have hair or something like that, you might have a bigger brush. Here it's a fairly well-defined line along these rocks in the sky. And so my brush is probably a good size there. But what you can do is you can change your brush size here. What I find easier is using the keyboard shortcuts, which are the left and right bracket just like they are in Photoshop. So as I hit my key, my left and right bracket keys, it changes the size of the brush. So I think this is probably a pretty good size brush, and all I do is just start painting along the edges of this horizon here. Sorry for the delay there. I'm switching to my tablet because it's just a little bit easier with the stylus. So all I'm going to do is move along here. And this goes pretty quick. Now I'm going to show you a little trick right here, and we'll use it again later in my next example. If you run into a long straight line, and this could be if you're doing an architectural thing, a horizon like this, anywhere you just have a long straight line, all you do is hold down the Shift key and click on your next point. Oops, sorry about that. I'll go back to where I was. Hold on the Shift key, click to your next point, and you see it just automatically draws in a nice straight line. So that's a pretty useful shortcut, especially when you're doing a lot of outlining with this thing. And that's actually consistent with what Photoshop does too, so I'm glad to see that Topaz implemented that in Remask. If you're painting in Photoshop, you can use that same little trick. So all I'm doing is just going along this line right here. When I get to this bush, I'll just go around that. And now my mask is just about done. All I have to do is cut out what I want and keep what I want. So I have my border defined. I'm going to go down here to where it says fill, and these buckets are just like a typical paint bucket. I'm going to go over here and click, and it fills that in with red, so it's going to get rid of that, and it's going to keep what's in green up here. So all I have to do is say compute mask, this button on the lower left on the bottom, and voila, I have a mask. So let's take a closer look at it. What I like to do is use the split screen in the upper right. This is the full screen, this is the split screen. And once you have a split screen, you can decide what it shows you. So I can say show me what it keeps, which is the sky, show me what it cuts, which is the landscape here. There's also one called Try Map, which shows you what we just looked at with all three colors of your keep, cut, and compute, or just look at the image. So what I'm going to do is I'll put it on the cut for right now, and then I'm just going to zoom in and look at my mask and see how it looks. Because we can always touch it up, and actually it's looking pretty good. There's as I move along here, you can see it's a pretty nice edge. So there are a few little things I need to touch up. One is right here, and I can just go back to these brushes over here, these basic brushes. So remember, this is my cut, and it's red, and I can also use keyboard shortcuts for these brushes. It's the Q, W, and E key for the basic brushes. So I can switch around between my brushes, and you can go back and redo any part. So this is a cut, and if you notice, I just barely touch it. I don't have to paint that in exactly, and it kind of just shrink wraps, which is really cool, right to the edge of the same tone. So it knows the tone, and it just kind of takes itself down there. And this this bush, maybe we can get that in there a little better. That looks pretty good. And overall, this is a really clean mask. So I'm going to go to the keep side here and just look. I thought I saw a little area over here. I don't know if you guys can see this very well, but there's, like right here, there's just a little bit spilling on this edge, and I can just touch it with the brush, and you notice it just kind of shrink wraps right to the edge of that rock. And I'll do that over here. So now we have, even on this little tree with all this, all these little branches and everything, you can see it's a pretty clear cutout. In case you're wondering what that magenta color is, that's just showing the part that's being masked out, and that will change if I switch between keep and cut. So overall, this mask, I think, is looking pretty good. And if we want, I can show you one more little tool here on this tree. What you can do is you can pick out a single color. That's what this single color brush is. It gives you a little dropper, and you decide whether you want the keep or the cut. So I'm actually want to cut out that tree. You can see it's kind of gray, so it's not really black, it's not really white. I don't want to end up with a see-through tree. So I'm going to click on the cut. I'm going to sample that tree, and you can see over here on the left it turned gray, because if you look at the image here, let me switch it over here to the image. That tree really is sort of rendered a little bit gray. So I sampled the exact color of that thing. And now I'm just going to paint over that a little bit, and look at that. It fills it right in. Pretty cool. So I think I'm pretty much ready to say okay and go back into Photoshop. So you notice that what happened here in this layer, and I want to explain that a little bit. Number one, I have a preference set in my Remask to create a new layer on the fly, so it did that. Otherwise, you can just drag your background layer down to the dog-eared page and duplicate it. You notice it also came back with a layer mask. One way that a lot of people use this program is to do compositing. In other words, putting two or more images together. Let's say we didn't want that sky in there at all, and we're going to put a completely different background in there, a completely different sky. You wouldn't necessarily need a mask. You just need to cut it out and then combine it with another image. But this is a lot sort of simpler use, so to speak, because really all I want to do is isolate the sky and just work on it. And so that's what the mask does. And you're seeing the mask similar to what you saw in Remask. So I have this layer over here, and now I can make my adjustments. And what I'm going to use for the adjustments to bring out the clouds is another plugin called Detail. So I go into my filter menu, down to Topaz Labs, and go into Detail. Now those of you that have some familiarity with other Topaz plugins know that some of the plugins like Adjust and Black and White Effects have a way of dealing with detail. You can add detail or essentially sharpen areas of the image, but it's more of a general purpose one. This one I like because I can isolate small, medium, and large detail, and then within each of those, and you can see these controls over on the right here, within each of those I can adjust both the detail, and then the boost is for the smaller fine detail or smaller medium detail that or less fine medium detail. And so I can adjust all those individually. The first thing you'll notice is that my image is funky color. So what happens is, as I mentioned before with StarEffects, it defaults to wherever it was before. So I'm going to do my reset all and bring my image back to the way it was when I brought it in. So I want to zoom in to the sky here. So I'll come back just a little bit so you can see most of the sky. And I want to work on the clouds. And that's what I'm going to be using Detail for. So because it's mostly medium and large detail, that's what I'm going to work on with this. And what I'm going to do is hit the medium detail here a little bit. Now you probably won't see a big difference. It changed a little bit. There's my before, there's my after. That's probably hard to see, but when I hit the boost, you'll see a lot more of an effect. Bring that up even a little more. Okay, so already we have a lot more texture in those clouds. I'm going to hold down my space bar, and there's the before. I'm going to let go, and there's the after. You can see already a lot more texture, but I want to get even a little more, so I'm going to hit the large detail now, and that's going to be sort of the bigger sections of the clouds. And again, it's rather subtle until I hit the boost. So let me hit the boost on that. And you can see that's bringing out the bigger, puffier clouds a little more. All right, so I think that's pretty good. I'm going to do a before and after again. There's my before, and there's my after. Now, it just so happens, I think I mentioned before, that I have a little cyan cast to this. It's a little heavy on the cyan, and the sky was more blue than that, which is just sort of a characteristic of this film. So I can go down to color, and there at the very bottom here is a hue slider. If I move it all the way to the right, it's going to make it very magenta, and if I move it all the way to the left, it's going to make it even more cyan. I just want to cut back a little of the cyan, so I'm probably going to just bring it down a little and see how it looks. So there's my before, there's my after. I'm going to bring it down even a little more. So now I have a bluer sky, less cyan. I've got beautiful texture in the clouds. I'm just going to say OK. And let me make this a little bigger. So now you can see those clouds, and I'm going to just do a before and after here. That's where we started. That's where we are. Now what I want to show you is when I really zoom into this thing, look at the border of this thing. There are no halos. There's none of that excess detail spilling in. Now some of you may have noticed when I was within detail that it looked like it was affecting the whole image, but because I have the mask, it's isolating the sky. So I don't have that sort of funky look to the detail in the rocks because it's masked out, but I've got all this nice extra detail in the sky. And I just wanted to show you how nice and clean these lines are along the horizon, even our little bush here, and the one over here that we kind of tweaked. Very, very clean, and it was very quick and easy. I tried this beforehand, and without having to explain it, I think I did the mask for this in about, it was under a minute. So that's a pretty quick way to do it. You could try to brush in effects, say in Lightroom, maybe using the clarity and contrast and using the auto mask, and you might be able to isolate the sky, but you wouldn't be able to get these same effects that we get from detail. So when we look at this thing as an overall, you know, there's my before, there's my after. It's not a huge difference, but it brings those clouds back and gets my sky even back to the right color. So there you have it for a sort of quick and easy way of using Remask along with detail. Two of my go-to and sort of favorite plugins here. So now what I want to do is I'm going to, this next image, I'm going to add a little more to the mix. I'm going to use Remask again, and I'm going to use also Adjust and StarEffects. So let me go back to my hub here, and we'll look for my other image, go to my film strip, and this is the other image that I wanted to show you guys. So this is an aspen tree, and I shot this in, let me make it bigger. I shot this in the San Francisco Peaks near Flagstaff in northern Arizona, obviously in the fall when the leaves are turning. And of course what I saw when I shot this image was a really nice bright white aspen tree with fall leaves backlit and a clear blue sky and lots of nice color and edge light. And as we all know, the camera can't very often interpret exactly what we see, and our brain and our eyes are going to compensate for that big brightness range, so we'll see the white tree as white, and naturally the camera doesn't see it that way. So what we want to do is isolate this tree, the main one in the foreground, brighten it up, and the other thing I want to do to this is kind of get the fall color leaves and the blue sky a little more vivid the way I remember it when I shot it. And at the very end, I'll also show you a way we can use StarEffects with this as well. So I'm going to go up into my photo menu, say Edit In. We're going to go into Photoshop again. I think first what I'm going to do is close out these other images. And go back to our aspen tree here. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new layer, because I really don't remember if I did set this in Remask, I think, to make a new layer. So we may end up with an extra one, but I'm also kind of a fan of labeling these with what we're doing so that I remember later on if I look at those layers. And the first thing we want to do is go into our friend Remask here, and we want to isolate the tree. So you might remember we need to go to our compute brush, and I'm going to blow this up all the way so that I know I'm getting a nice clean line on it. Now, you remember my little shortcut trick where I hold the shift key to get my straight lines? This is a perfect use of that because we have so many of these straight lines in the image, and it really helps us speed-wise and efficiency-wise going through here. And what I don't know if you guys know this little trick because it works in Photoshop too, is I'm also holding down the space key, and it's switching my cursor to a hand so that I can move around the image. So that allows me to quickly switch between the brush and moving around on the image. When I'm at 1-to-1 here, I'm only seeing a section of the image at a time. And so basically what I'm just going to do is go around the whole side of the tree here so that we can isolate it. And then once we do that, we can create our mask. Now, I will mention that I tried masking this a couple other ways. I tried doing it in Lightroom using their auto mask, and I tried the quick mask and magic wand in Photoshop. And I can say without a doubt that this thing had the cleanest mask of all. Now over here I have these highlights. So you might wonder, do I go, these are bright white highlights and this is the edge of the tree, but in theory I could also go along the edge of these shadows. Because I'm brightening up the tree, these edges, they're backlit with direct light from the sun. There's pretty much no detail in them, so it's okay to use those as edges. Even though I'm going to be lightening the tree, I can't really get those any lighter, so I don't really have to worry about including those edges, and it just makes it a little easier for doing this mask. And you notice this shift thing works pretty well. Now, when I get to this little branch, I'm just going to go around the edge of it. See how steady I can be here. And we can always touch that up later, so it's not a big deal if we don't get it exactly right. You saw that from before when we were doing the outlining of the canyon shot. And I'm getting pretty close to done here. Just go around this knot. So that was pretty painless. Go down and get my buckets again. First I'll go to the full view here by using my little navigation tools in the upper left here. Now I'm going to go down to the lower left, get my bucket. You notice too with Topaz, and you can turn this option on or off, as I mouse over things it gives you a little explanation. So it tells you right there, flood fill to compute. This one is flood fill to cut, which is what we want. Click here, and I've got my mask figured out. I just say compute mask. And there we go. We have our mask. Again, I'm going to go to the split view here. I'm going to show what I'm keeping. And then I'm going to zoom in and see how my mask looks and decide whether I need to touch it up or not. But you can see this is a pretty quick way of doing this. If you've tried masking or selecting things like this in other programs, I can tell you I never got quite as good as this when I was trying Lightroom and Photoshop, and it took me, I think, at least 30 minutes in Lightroom to try to get it as precise as Remask will do it. So I'm just looking here for little areas of contamination like this. By contamination, what I mean is there's a little bit of a see-through area there. If you look at the mask itself over here, it's a little bit gray, and I want it solid black because I really don't want that effect bleeding through to my background because I'm going to lighten this tree. So again, I can go back to my brushes and touch things up, and all I have to do is really just click on it a little bit, and it just kind of spreads itself out to the edge. And incidentally, you can do this either on the picture side or the mask side. So if I go over here to the mask side and click on that, you can see it will, actually I kind of overdid it there, I'm going to go back. You can see I can do it from the mask side too, and I have that same thing whereas I just brush over the edge of it, it kind of shrink wraps to the same tone. And out here is where I would want to cut. And so I can just go back and forth with these brushes and just kind of go through and touch this up. Now where I see tone and texture, like right here in the mask, I want to keep that. And that's what's nice about this split view, is sometimes I'll catch things just looking at the mask view that I wouldn't see in the image itself. Other times I'll catch it in the image. Like here's an example right here. If you can see this very well, it's a very light gray, which means that part of the tree isn't selected and I want it to be. So I'm just going to run my brush through there, and we're looking pretty good here. I'm just going to do a quick run through, make sure that we've got a little bits going over on this brush. Sorry, on the branch. So I'm going to use the brush to touch that up. And you can see over here we're pretty well shrink wrapped around that That's a technical term, shrink wrap. So I'm just going to run along here. We've just got a couple little areas, and I might even be being pickier than I need to be with this mask. But I'd say that's pretty good. So I'm just going to go ahead and say OK. And you noticed it did create a new layer. I'm going to get rid of this other one. And like I mentioned before, that's an option that you can set in there. So now what I'm going to do is go into my adjustments. I'm going to go into the layer, new adjustment layer, and I'm going to pick levels. Before I do that, I want to mention something. All I really need is the mask here. So if you want to be really efficient, you could just create a brand new adjustment layer. For those of you that may not be that familiar with Photoshop, it's pixel based. So every time you make a copy of the image, it's taking up more space and using more computing power. I'm just going to call this Lighten the Tree. So if there's any time you can not have extra image layers, that's usually a good thing. And one little trick here is I can click, all I really need is the mask. So I can click on the mask and I can bring that up to this layer. It says, do I want to replace it? Yes. And I can actually throw this thing out at this point. So what it's going to do, it's going to isolate the adjustments to what's in this mask. So now when I click on my levels here, I can bring that highlight endpoint in somewhere around here, and as you can see, that's looking a whole lot better. So there I've lined up my tree. It's pretty nice. I'm almost done, but guess what? I can use this mask for some other things. What I want to do is bring up those colors, so I'm going to use adjust to do that because my background colors were really more vivid than that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate my background because I need another copy of that. And this time I want to isolate the background. So I'm going to bring this mask down to here. Now I don't want to move it, I want to copy it. So if you hold down the Alt key on a PC, Option key on a Mac, bring that down, I now have a copy of the mask. But the mask is in the wrong direction, so to speak, because it's isolating the tree again, and I want to isolate the background. So you can do Command I for invert, or I think it's Control I on a PC, and I invert my mask. So now I've isolated the background. I'm all set to go into adjust. So I'm going to go to Filter, Topaz Labs, go to Adjust 5. This is going to be a pretty quick one. It's defaulting to wherever it was last time, so I'm going to do my Reset All. And here I'm just going to use the presets. This one down here, Mild Color Pop. Try that. That looks great. So here's my before, check it out. Here's my after. Now I know you're going to say that the tree isn't white like it is before, but remember we have a mask in here. So as soon as we go back into Photoshop, it'll be isolating just the background. And we were able to use the very same mask that we had before. So there's my before, there's my after. I've got that nice pop in the background. And there we go. So there's where we started. There's where we ended up. And I'm going to try to do a really quick finishing touch on this. And before I do that, I just want to zoom in and show you how nice and clean these edges are. Look around this branch, no bleeding. Remember, we did a significant amount of lightening on this, and you just see no halos around the branch, around this tree. It's just a beautiful mask, and it was super easy, and without me explaining it, super fast. Try it on your own. It's just a really great tool. So the last thing is I'm going to show you real quickly another way to use StarEffects, and that's for a little sunburst. Let me go to the overall. And what you see is visually, you're led up this tree to this bright point. Our eyes tend to go to the brightest point. I kind of want to have a reason for that bright spot being there because I can't actually see the sun in this photo. So I'm just going to put my own little sun spot in there, sun flare. So what I want is a composite of all these layers, and you can do that by holding down the Option or Alt key on a PC. Click on this and do Merge Visible. And what it does is it takes all these visible layers and it combines them into a new layer. So now I can go into my StarEffects. And they have this handy little preset down here for sun flare. Now you notice that little progress bar, it's going through all of these now, so we're just going to have to wait a second till it gets down to sun flare. Once it does compute those, you can go back over them and it won't have to recompute them. So I'm going to pick sun flare, and that's pretty good in terms of sun flare, but I want to do a few adjustments to it. I'm going to bring the luminance up so I can see, so it just makes it a little bit bigger and more prominent. This makes your stars more prominent. So I'll just bring that up a little bit and you can see a little bit more of a star effect. Sometimes you can change the position of these. I'm just going to bring this down. There we go. You can choose a number of points down here, and the reason I just changed that is because it just looks a little more realistic to me. And the other thing that I probably want to do here is this sunburst is a little too warm for this time of day. If I want it to be a little more realistic, I can go into color adjustments over here on the right and bring the color temperature down. So to the right is as warm as it gets, to the left is as cold as it gets, and I want to go somewhere somewhat neutral, maybe slightly to the cool side, and so I just have a little bit more realistic sunburst there. Down in the additional effects, I'm going to bring up my ring flare. There's already one there, but it's a little hard to see, so I'll bring that up a little bit. Let's try in here. That's pretty good. Now you can see a little ring flare. So I'm going to say, okay, I think that's a pretty nice sunspot. Now, there's a problem with this. It's not very realistic to have the sun on top of this tree like that. So we have this handy little mask that we already created, and what we want to do is block out the tree from getting that sun effect. So I can go down here where I have, now this is a mask, remember the white reveals and the black hides it. So I'm going to hold down my Option key, Alt on a PC, which makes a duplicate, bring that up there, and voila, we hit it behind the tree. So there you go. Very cool image, and it looks like we're getting a little short on time here, so I'll turn it back over to you, Nicole.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was a great presentation, lots of information, and we have some great feedback coming back. We have about a little under 10 minutes for some questions for Joel. So let's start off with a couple questions. The first was from Lenny. What kind of tablet and size tablet are you using? He was interested when you were going through Remask.
Oh, okay, Lenny, that's a good question. I use a Wacom tablet, or Wacom, I'm not even sure how they pronounce it. But I use a small one. I don't like to take up a lot of desk space, so I use their 4x5 tablet, and it's part of their Intuos line. They have a lot of different lines. You can check them out on their website, but just a tablet in general really helps in a lot of situations for painting and drawing and just trying to do precise things.
Okay, thank you. Let's see here. Steve would like for you to go over how you eliminated the layers to the new layer. When you got rid of the remask layer but kept the mask itself on the levels layer, any chance you could go back over that process just one quick second?
Sure.
Great.
Can you repeat that again? You wanted to see how I...
Sorry. If you could show how you got rid of the remask layer altogether but kept the mask when you moved it up to your levels adjustment.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Here, what I'll do is I'll go back to my layers, my levels layer, and I will delete that mask and then show you how I did it. What you want to do is first you want to select the layer that you're taking the mask from. And then you notice there's a little outline over the image part. You want to click on the mask itself so that it's outlining the mask itself. And then what you want to do, and it depends whether you want to duplicate it or just move it. I think in this case what I did is I just moved it. So I'm literally just clicking on this mask, dragging it up to the layer, and it's adding it into the, it's adding it right into that layer. And then I think I also showed you can invert that mask. So if you select it and you do either Control or Command I, that inverts it. Did that answer the question?
I believe it did. Yes, thank you.
Okay, cool.
Kind of just I guess, a question that a couple people have asked: Lightroom versus Photoshop. I have a couple people who have said, why, if you have Photoshop, would you have Lightroom, and what's the benefit of Lightroom for you and your workflow?
That is an excellent question. I do use both. I'm going to go into Lightroom here just to show you what the interface looks like. The best way I can explain it is that Lightroom is like a digital hub. So the way I say it is it's a way to organize your digital photo life. So it does a lot more than just adjust photos, in that you can keyword, you can organize, you can find images. Right now I think I have about 50,000 images in this library, and I can find any image I want in the blink of an eye just by typing in a keyword. So it's an organizational tool, and you can see in the upper right there are these different modules, so you can print from it, create a website in just a few minutes, create a slideshow very quickly. So it's really more of a hub, whereas Photoshop is really designed for manipulating images, and it can do it in a lot more, there are a lot more things you can do with it than you can do with Lightroom. However, Lightroom's develop module allows you to do most of the things that you need to do on a regular basis to your photos, things like cropping, maybe adjusting saturation, things like that you would do on a regular day-to-day basis. So when I go to Photoshop is when I need to go beyond that. So in this case, for instance, with the Topaz plugins, my little rule of thumb is if I'm going to use one plugin only, I'll do it right from within Lightroom, because Topaz allows me to do that. They have a program called Fusion Express, allows you to use all their plugins right from within Lightroom. Also, if you have Aperture or iPhoto or a number of other programs, you can do it right from within there. And so if I'm only using one, I'll do that. Otherwise, I'll go to Photoshop, where I have the advantage of using layers, and I might be doing multiple effects, like you just saw the last one I did with the Aspen tree, where I actually used 3 different plugins. So that was a perfect application for going into Photoshop, because I would not be able to do that in Lightroom. So I hope that answers your question. That's the 2-minute synopsis of Photoshop and Lightroom.
That works. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Joel. This was great. I have tons of people saying thank you.
Oh, good. Well, you're all very welcome, and I really appreciate everybody attending.
All right. Thanks, everybody, and have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.